Hey folks, welcome back to another Dice Tower preview. I'm Mark, and today we're taking a look at Clash of Galliformes, which is brought to you by Toadies Games. It's for 2 to 4 players, ages 14 and up, and games generally run about 30 to 60 minutes. Set in an alternate timeline, ground-living birds work alongside tribal clans. These clans have developed alongside their feathery mounts, and the cultures have been formed by their specific clan birds. Some have mastered the way of faster bird breeding, while others have gone down a more warlike path. Now is the time to choose your bird, and in so doing, your way of life. Explore, build, and battle your way through this strategy and resource management game, where you will expand your territory to find supplies and new technologies for your tribes. The threat from rival clans is also constant, so you'll have to adapt your strategies and think ahead of your opponents to survive. Will you conquer the other clans by force, or will your memory live on through the peaceful measure of completing cave paintings? The choice is yours. So you'll be controlling one of these bird clans. Now, each of the bird clans has some unique stats around each of the birds. You have a large bird and a small bird, and it's going to cost you food to put them out into the world. And each of these birds is going to have a defense and an offense value, as well as how many can actually be put into play during the course of the game. Now, you'll see that at the top of the board, your type of bird is named, as well as a special ability that you get to start with. And next to each of the birds, there's a spot to add additional abilities. So you can really customize your clan, make them something unique every game. It will cost you 10 resources to buy into these special abilities, and there's all kinds of different things. It might just be as simple as getting an offense or defense value, but you can also increase your movement and lots of other types of abilities that you can put into play. I really like this aspect. It really allows you to customize your clan. So resources are key in this game. You're going to be spending them, gaining them a lot. So you have upgrades around your bird for getting offense and defense. You have to spend those resources, and you can place a cube there and get pluses to those different values. Now, you also have upgrades for your nests, which are represented by the large disc out in the world, and you have small discs, which are outposts, and you can get upgrades for that. And what does that mean? Well, you just get a defense value, because there are lots of battles in this game. You're going to be battling back and forth, trying to gain position out in the world and expand your clan's empire, so to say. So you'll have to keep those in mind, and you'll want to upgrade them. That's the key here, is that getting your clan into a position where you have some nice defense, so maybe folks don't mess with you quite as often. But you do have your main resources. At the bottom, you're going to be tracking how many that you're going to be gaining per turn. And then in the middle is where you'll calculate all your different resources that you gained and spent and so forth. Now, the main resources here are food. These are little leaves, and you've got wood, which is like a bark or tree branch, and then you've got stone, which is this big stone icon. So those are the three main resources that you're dealing with, but there are also tech upgrades in the world. So at the top of your board, on the top right, you'll see there's additional areas where you can place chits or tokens that you've gathered from the board. You've got things like fire, you've got rope and basket, and you've got knives, things that allow you to get all these different types of upgrades. Now, again, just like with offense and defense for the birds, you're going to have to pay the resources it calls for in order to place one of those tech upgrades. And there are other areas of the board that we're going to require that you have a tech upgrade, like a rope, in order to continue moving down a path of upgrading those. And tech upgrades happen to be one of the ways that you can bring the game to an end. You have to have 2 in place, and you also have to have a full-on cave painting or puzzle piece placed at the top of the board. You'll see there's a series of numbers here. You'll also be gathering those numbers from the board, and on your turn you'll be able to place them into the slots. And eventually, when you fill those slots up, then you have some choices to be made. You can gather the different cave paintings, different sections of them, turning in 3 numbers and placing them on your main board. And that would be one of the ways to bring the game to an end when you finish that puzzle piece or that cave painting, and you have 2 tech upgrades in place that will bring the game to an end. But you also have 50 rounds that will also be another way the game will come to an end. So you hope to be gathering the most points, and there's so many different ways to get points. It was really interesting actually, because we had some folks that weren't expanding as well on the board, but there were so many ways and options to gain points, which we'll take a look at. You get points for all kinds of things. For just having those numbers, you get points, things like that. And however many outposts you have in play. all kinds of options. There's even a golden egg that you can get, which is worth 9 points. Now, these different cave paintings are not just about ending the game, but they also give you a special power. So going after those early is key because you can use their power through the course of the game and really does aid you and help quite a bit. So you try to finish those puzzle pieces. Now you have to beware because if someone takes out your main nest, they could go after your puzzle pieces as well. So lots of interesting back and forth in this game as you try to hold position. Now each player also will have a series of cards. These are cards that you'll use in defense, in offense, and in defense for your nests and your outposts. So there are values 1, 2, and 3, and you get to use them once when you go into battle, and we'll take a quick look at battles in a minute. But when you jump out into this world, one of the fun things is that every game, the world configuration can be very different because these tiles all are come into play, and it is part of how you play the game. So each player will be putting 2 into play, and you'll basically get to decide how this world builds out before you jump in. You'll be placing all the tokens out, and you've got some orphan birds basically that you have to deal with, these gray ones out in the world. You have to battle them if you want that position on that spot. So lots of interesting aspects as you place your nest with your starting bird and get ready to expand your clan's empire. So gameplay here is very straightforward. You're going to be first moving, and it's not mandatory. You don't have to move if you don't want to, but you move a bird or birds from 1 or 2 locations, and you have to encounter that next spot. You can only move 1 location unless you have a specific ability or power that allows you to do more. But you move to that next location, and a number of things can happen here. Either you're picking up a tech upgrade, or you're picking up a number for those puzzle or cave pieces, and you're just going to be placing those next to your board. You're not going to be doing anything with them beyond that yet. But you might run into a bird or an outpost or a nest. If you do, then you have to battle. And battles are super straightforward. You've got dice for offense and defense. You're going to be rolling that and then adding it to your overall score. You'll calculate it from your main board, but you also have the option of putting one of those cards into play that are one-time use. So maybe this battle you really want to win, so you put level 3 attack in to add to your dice, plus all the attack values you have for your bird. You calculate back and forth. Whoever has the highest is going to win, and if there's ties, then the attacker wins. So battles are going to happen quite frequently as you encounter other birds, nests, and outposts, and various things happen when you defeat these things. And if your opponent or you move into a spot with multiple birds, or you have to defeat multiple birds and their nest and their different outposts, all that stuff becomes cumulative. So birds add together, all their defense attack values, as well as the nests and the outposts do the same thing. So that's stuff to keep in mind when you actually go after these things. So keeping a bird at your nest is kind of key, so it has more attack defense value when someone shows up, because nests and outposts don't just naturally have a defense. You have cards that you can use if someone does come up against a nest or outpost that is empty, and there's also upgrades for those things as well, but you're going to have limited use for nests and outposts, so trying to protect them is key. And gaining your forces perhaps in a spot to hold the line, so to say. And of course, as you'd expect, there's spoils in war. So you might be gathering puzzle pieces from your opponent, you might get tech upgrade pieces, things like that. Now, if their bird is defeated, the bird is out of the game completely. However, outposts just get put back into their supply, and nests can move to another spot. So you replace an outpost that you already have with your nest. You can be eliminated, which means you'd have to come back in as a new bird. So that's an interesting aspect, and that's really how battles work, and that's one of the core things you're going to be doing. The rest of it is all about gathering resources. So that brings us to the gather and trade phase, where you'll be calculating all the different resources you have available to you. Based on the outposts that you have in play, will determine how many of a different type of resource. Again, you've got food, wood, and stone. So your outposts might have spots where you'll see those icons, and you'll calculate that on your main board. Now, you may have upgrades on your board as well that give you additional food, things like that. So you'll be putting all those into play, but then you also get to decide if you want to trade with a fellow player. You can trade anything from puzzle pieces to the numbers to tech upgrades. Maybe you're trying to get a certain set of numbers because you're limited on what you have. Lots of different reasons to trade, and you will be doing this frequently because others will be gathering specific tokens that you need. Perhaps they don't though, because every time you land on a spot, you'll gather that token. And this is just where you're trying to decide and put your resources together for the next phase. Which brings us to the develop and expand phase. As you'd expect, you'll be developing your player boards and expanding into the world. So one of the things about expanding is that if you have a bird at a location, you could spend 2 food to put one of your outposts out there, which is key because if it's a location that has a resource, then you're going to be gaining that resource every turn. Not this turn, but every other turn. So you want to put those outposts out as much as you can. And then you can put birds into play as well, and every player is going to pay a different food cost to put those birds, but you place them at your nest. And you can also upgrade things on your board, right? So you can do those tech upgrades that we talked about, paying the cost. Or you can do a defense or an attack value upgrade for your birds or for your different nests and your outposts. So those are the things you're developing on your main player board, and you can put those numbers that you've gathered, you can put them into play into this puzzle area. Now, the interesting thing though is that once that puzzle area is complete, 1 through 9, then you have to make a choice. Either you're developing and expanding, or you're putting a puzzle piece into play. You remove 3 numbers and grab one of these puzzle pieces. Again, when you put a whole puzzle or whole cave painting in play, you get that ability of that painting. So it really adds a lot to the game for sure. So you do have some interesting trade-offs. Now, either way you go, either with the cave paintings or developing and expanding, you still have the option of gathering a new ability. So again, paying 10 resources in order to add that to one of your birds. So it is an interesting aspect, and you do have to make some interesting trade-offs through the course of the game. So you'll continue play this way until either you've reached 50 rounds or someone has completed a cave painting and 2 tech upgrades. Calculating points, whoever has the most will be the ultimate clan. Now, there's 2 big point items. First and foremost, if you complete one of the cave paintings, you're gonna get 9 points for that. And there is a golden egg, which we haven't really talked about. In the trade phase, you could potentially trade any number of things. So 6 numbers or 6 tech upgrades or 2 of your puzzle pieces to some other player. You can just give them those and you'll gain the golden egg, which is worth 9 points as well. However, the golden egg can be stolen if your outpost or if your nests are destroyed, things like that. So you have to keep that in mind. Definitely a strategic moment to gather that particular thing to get points at the end of the game. Now, all kinds of other ways to get points as well, for the different outposts you have, for the birds you have in play, for the different numbers you've gathered, for the different tech tokens you've gathered, lots of different ways. So you don't just have to rely on those big pointers, because we found that, again, the game was pretty close, even for those who hadn't finished a full puzzle piece. All right, folks, just a reminder once again, this has been a Dice Tower paid preview, and everything you've seen here has been in prototype form, so keep a close eye on the campaign for any changes that still may occur. Now, with that said, this game has a really interesting theme. I like this idea of these birds, these clans, how they've come together to work together, and you have a lot of interesting choices as you move out into this world, and how do you develop the right resources to get the upgrades you need and expand your presence in the world. Lots of interesting back and forth with your fellow players as you try to decide what's worth trading and what are you willing to give up. So I like that aspect for sure, but folks, ultimately, if this looks like something of interest to you, I'm sure they'd appreciate your support. So I think that's it for me, and until next time, we'll see you at the table.